Greetings, everyone. I'm Andre Riley, the Director of Communications for your Baltimore City Public Schools. I'm here in Beachfield for a special town hall. Why am I not at a desk in my own home? Because I want to show you guys a classroom related to our small group in-person learning. Now I'm here at Beachfield Elementary with a good friend of mine, Principal Kelly Carino. I practice, I love.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much, Andre, for coming out to the beach.
Thank you. Oh, see, I didn't know that. You learn something new every time when you visit our schools. They really are special places. Before we get started, I want to welcome all of you to our town hall and give you a couple of ground rules. Tonight, in addition to this quick tour, we're going to take your questions and we're going to work to answer them in real time. So what do I need you to do? Whether you're on YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, I love that you put your questions in the comment area. The communications team will then take your questions, forward them up to me when I get seated, and we'll try to answer those with a cadre of experts. But before we get started, I want to welcome a very special guest, Dr. Sonia Santelises, our Chief Executive Officer. Hello, Dr. Santelises. How are you doing?
Fine. How are you, Andre? Principal Caridio? You guys are looking great out there. And just want to welcome everybody this evening. We announced today where we will be opening up schools for small groups of targeted students to be able to give families an option. And we released those schools today. They were actually a larger number than we had initially anticipated. Really in part due to the number of volunteers, the number of teachers and principals that we had volunteering enabled us to offer more small groups. And again, these are small groups, and you can see with Principal Caridio and Mr. Riley there that it doesn't, it won't hold the regular number of students that we're all used to seeing, but it will enable families to have some options about bringing targeted groups of students back. So just want to welcome everybody here tonight for the town hall, and I will turn it back over to our fabulous, the best host in all of city schools, Andre Riley.
Well, thank you, Dr. Santelises. I needed that burst of energy. Thank you for your kind comments. Today was a big day for city schools. We had a lot of individuals, families, members of the community who want to learn more about small group in-person learning. So again, that's why we're here in Beachfield, to show you what a classroom looks like in real time. So you can't say that I made a pretty video. It didn't show you what it looks like in real time. So Principal Caridio, how long have you guys been hosting a student learning center?
So we are now moving into our 5th week, and we are almost completely filled up. So it's been an absolutely fantastic opportunity for our community and the surrounding community as well.
Excellent. About how many kids are we talking here on any given day?
So we're servicing about 45 to 50 scholars per day. They get to come in, they get to see their peers, but we get to do it in a social distance and fun manner.
Excellent. Now, we're here today because we're going to talk a little bit about the health and safety measures. We have quite a few families that received the announcement, and they're working to make a decision on if this is for them. Do they feel comfortable with our procedures and allowing students to come into our buildings? So here at this desk, we have a couple of items. I'm going to ask you about them, and I'd love for you to share those with the audience. First of all, when someone comes into your building, what happens?
Number one, you cannot enter my building until you have a temperature check. Everybody has to get a temperature check, and then we ask the 4 questions, the COVID questions. Once you're able to pass the COVID questions, you get a little squirt of hand sanitizer, and then you can be on your way, and the scholars are able then to go down to their classroom to start instruction for the day.
All right, so everybody.
Every single solitary person, even Dr. S, when she came, she asked me in a second, she got a name. So anybody that comes in this building, anybody, and even when you leave and come back, everybody gets screened.
Okay, now let's talk about some of the PPE items.
Sure.
Personal protective equipment. You're wearing a mask, I'm wearing a mask. What are some of the masks that are available for visitors?
Sure. So we have these for our scholars. Every scholar gets these, but you also can wear your own mask if you would like to. And we also have on deck a plethora of just a regular mask as well. And then every staff member has received one of these. So when they're in here with the scholars, they have on the mask and they have on the protective face shield. And then the scholars are behind their desk shield with their masks on at all times.
All right, now tell me about this room. This doesn't look like as many desks as we normally have in a room this
No,
size.
sir. So they are exactly 6 feet apart. Scholars know that they're supposed to stay in their bubble. So this is a pod, and so scholars only, those scholars that are in this room are the only ones who will be in this room. I don't even come in this room. So in the event we did have a positive COVID case or a symptom, we know that it's just this pod that has been affected and these adults in this room. So therefore, we need to shut down any other part of the building.
All right, now, the talk about classroom pods. Let's say a student is exhibiting some sort of signs of illness, maybe a runny nose, maybe you were telling me a little bit earlier, a young lady complained of her throat feeling scratchy. What happens related to this pod if a member of the pod isn't feeling well?
So if a member of a pod in this specific section is not feeling well, we take them down, we take them to the health suite, they do the screening, and then the family will come pick up the child just to be precautious. The child will then go home, and if they do believe that it's some sort of COVID symptom, the family has an option of testing the child, or if the family does not, then this pod, just this pod only, with quarantine for 14 days. And then they will be able to resume back into the instructional setting after that.
All right, if a student is suspected of having COVID, are they allowed to come back into the building and not be tested?
No, if they're suspected of it.
All right, excellent. All right, now let's talk about a few more things. There have been questions about, is there enough cleaning supplies? Do we have enough items? What do you have here?
So we have tons of these alcohol wipes. We have tons of hand sanitizer, soap dispensers, towels. We also have big things of the Clorox wipes. And these, when the scholars move out of here, just to even get their lunch, this is all sanitized, and then they're able to come back into their pod. So there's cleaning throughout the day. The bathrooms are clean. The bathrooms are there's a schedule of when they go, so we know exactly who has gone into that bathroom, and then it's washed. And then also scholars get to come and they get to have social distancing recreational time. So when they go outside, they're not using balls and things like that, but they're able to go outside, they're able to have time with their friends, and then anything that is utilized outside, we make sure that all the playground equipment is clean in between each exchange of scholars getting outside.
Okay, now tell me about this room. What age group of students is in this room right now?
So this is our first grade pod, our little people, and they do a fantastic job. They know to stay. You would believe it or not, they keep their mask up all the time. The first week we just go over, you keep your mask up, and they're the ones telling everybody else, make sure it's over your nose. So they've been actually fantastic with keeping up the mask and all that.
All right, but if you find somebody who isn't,
Yep.
and you have 40-some students plus any number of staff, and things happen where people may not follow the rules or may not understand that they're not following the rules. How do you address that as a building leader?
So we haven't had that issue so far, but in the event we did, we would just call them in and make sure that they understand that, they need to make sure that they're keeping their masks up at all times. And we are constantly doing continuous checks and making sure that people are keeping their masks up. We just come to the door, and also we make sure that there's continuous hand washing, hand sanitizing, et cetera, throughout the day.
All right, and finally, what would you share with families that are considering small group in-person learning? I mean, this is a big step for families, and these are their babies. What would you share with them as far as their consideration?
So I would say I know families are extremely apprehensive about sending their scholars back to school, but what I can assure you is that me and my colleagues in the district have put in a ton of measures in place to make sure that scholars are coming back in a safe manner, but in a social manner, and in a manner that they're able to see each other. We talk about students being able to have the social access, and even though this is not ideal, it's great, and you get to see them smile. You get to see them smiling with their eyes, by the way, and laughing and just hearing them, just be kids. So I understand parents are apprehensive, but City Schools has done a fantastic job in putting a ton of things in place to make sure that we are social distance and that we have plenty of supplies. So I hear you. My baby's desk is right there. She comes as well. So I know families are apprehensive, but I really feel like, we're on week 5 and we've had no scholar cases at all.
Principal Carino, you've been great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having my colleague
Yes.
Joel out here. And thanks for allowing me to host the town hall from this space. Speaking of everybody, I'm running over to my computer. Joel's going to show you a little bit more of the room. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
I'll see you guys in 3 seconds.
All right. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm back. Let's get to a few items related to tonight. So let's start with a few questions from Facebook. Deshaun S. Smith. Deshaun asked, why are you opening school and the numbers are getting higher for COVID-19? Deshaun feels like we're not looking out for kids or teachers. It says he'll do online for his child. Dr. Santelises, can you come to the forefront, please?
Sure thing, Andre, right here. And what I would say is a couple of things. One, part of why we are opening with small groups and not with a full return is because we had anticipated at this time of year, based on what epidemiologists were saying, our health advisory group was saying, we had anticipated that there might be the kind of increase that we're seeing now. And it's part of why, again, we're emphasizing small groups returning. So that's one. And then two, families absolutely still have that choice to keep their scholars home. And we know and anticipated that a full 50% plus of families would opt in that way. And two, part of why we're showing you these protocols is because we wanted to demonstrate why we really have not had serious outbreaks at city schools, because we really have been working with all of the precautions that CDC has outlined and more. We are continuing to monitor, and again, it's part of why we developed this first stage of the plan with only small groups in mind. And so that's why we have it planned the way that we do.
Thank you, Dr. Santelises. It feels weird talking to you through a mask, but I'll get over it. Thank you a lot. On to our next question. Dr. Lynette Washington, I have a question that I didn't prepare you for, but I think you're going to be great at it. Dr. Washington, can you come to the camera for me?
Yes. Hi, Andre.
Well, hello there. Dr. Washington, what are desk shields?
So desk shields are they are plastic, shields that are used to sit on top of a desk. It is something that is not attached to a desk. It's temporary, so it can be moved. But it's basically to serve as another layer of protection for a student who is also still sitting 6 feet distance from another student at another desk. So it's just a plastic shield protection.
Thank you. Pretty simple question, but I knew you'd be great at it. And Dr. Washington, why have you here? There have been a number of questions related to public transportation for students. How are we protecting, or how are we helping to protect students that will take public transportation?
So we are in constant communication with the MTA about what are the protective measures that they're taking in place in order to protect our students. And it's the same type of measures that they would be taking for anyone who's riding public transportation. There's no standing on the buses. And so even though they may not also be doing social distancing on their buses as we are doing on the yellow buses, they're requiring masks to be worn on the buses. And again, like I said, that there's no standing. There's certain entries way a student or anyone who's riding public transportation will enter the bus and exit the bus. So those are the measures that they're taking, and we're also, continually expressing and sharing our concerns from our families about MTA buses and any other additional measures that they can be taking. But that's the main thing that we're doing right now.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. I appreciate you. Next up, Dr. Deborah Brooks. Dr. Brooks, how's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you, Andre?
Oh, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for joining us tonight. I have a question about students that are hard of hearing or deaf. Generally, how is the district accommodating students that are hard of hearing or deaf?
So we are currently providing additional support based upon the students' IEPs for the students who have deaf, hard of hearing. We have a deaf, hard of hearing program that we're actually providing in-person supports currently for those students where we have an interpreter as well as additional adult supports that are in the classroom providing those supports and services. And for the families that have continued to want their children to receive those services at home, we have provided additional support virtually for those families through our assistive technology support for those families, as well as through the virtual platform, those additional supports on the computer. So we have provided both in-person supports as well as virtual supports for our deaf, hard of hearing families, and as well as for our deaf, hard of hearing staff by providing interpreters that will be available for our staff and as for our students in person as well as virtual. So we will continue to provide those supports, whether a family wants to continue virtually or wants to have their students receive those services in person.
Thank you kindly, Dr. Brooks, and I know I'm going to be back, so I look forward to seeing you in just a second. Before we move forward, can you all see the desk shields? I know they're kind of translucent and they might be difficult to see on video. I don't expect you all to answer me. There's like several hundred of you on here, but I hope you can see them. Jewel, can you touch one where the bottle is? Right there. Just to give them an idea. Yeah, just move your hand around it so they get a sense. Thank you, Jewel. I appreciate it. And as you can see, they stand up pretty far from where students will be seated, and we're using them across the district. So thank you all for doing that. And if you have questions like that and you want to see something different, we will show you one that's different. Dr. Brooks, can you come back to the camera for me, please?
Certainly.
Hi.
Hi.
What about students that are in special education but may not wear a mask or may choose not to wear a mask?
So for students that are receiving specially designed instruction who may have difficulty keeping the mask on, we also are providing the face shields so that they are still practicing safe protocols. The teachers will also have the face shields. So we do know that there are some students, because of sensory needs, that they may not be able to keep the mask on for long periods of times, but they still will have a face covering because they will still have the face shields, as well as the teachers having the face shields and the mask. They will also have the desk shields. But we do have students that are currently receiving the in-person services that have both the mask and the face shields. We also provide mask breaks where we allow students to be able to go outside to remove their mask, practicing social distancing, because we know that it can be quite a challenge for the length of time to keep the mask on. But we do also provide the face shield so that their face are still covered. And that we're still practicing social distancing for those students as well.
See, Doc, last time I told you I wouldn't have you up there that long, and I brought you right back. Thank you for being helpful as always, Dr. Brooks. Dr. Washington, I have a pretty unique question, and I need your help to answer it. Can you come back? So, Dr. Washington, one of our viewers tonight says, wow, that looks like a really large classroom that you're in. Is this classroom at Beachfield about the standard size for one of our classrooms?
Beachfield. So most average size of our classrooms are about 500 square feet. So some classrooms can be slightly bigger. Some of the newer buildings have classrooms all the way up to 800 square feet. So basically what you're going to do is we would take the spaces of the classroom, take in consideration any fixtures on walls and some of those different things like that. And we would measure and ensure that every single desk is 6 feet from the desk that's in front or either sides of that particular desk. So that classroom may have more than 6 feet social distance, but that would be probably the average size for our classrooms. I'm trying to remember exactly what the size for Beachville is. I can't remember, but most of our classrooms are between 500 to 800 square feet.
I think that's perfect, Dr. Washington. I appreciate you. Thanks a lot.
No problem.
All right, now I'm going to call my superstar. Not that everybody on here isn't a superstar, but when I have questions I absolutely am not sure how to answer, I call our chief of staff, Allison Perkins Cohen, to the camera.
Hey, Andre, how are you?
I'm fine, Allison. It's really good to see you as always.
Good to see you.
All right, so during our announcement today, Allison, we announced that 44 schools would contain some form of small group in-person learning. Now, we know that some of those schools are already serving as SLCs. Can you speak to why that is a little bit, why we choose to expand at some of the SLC sites?
Yeah, so we're trying to build on what we've been doing. So build on the success we've had. So we put SLC sites, we distributed those geographically, looking at our community conditions index to make sure we were placing them where there were lots of students and students that we wanted to be able to serve. But when we were adding this is really building on that success of the SLCs. We've been trying, Andre, to kind of crawl, walk, run, and really make sure we're taking it slow and doing this right and learning as we're going. So we did 200 summer school students in the summer in person. We have the SLC sites and some small in-person learning already happening for English language learners and special ed. So that's about 950 or 1,000 students. And then we're going to add these sites. And some of those are at our Student Learning Center sites because those are sites where we have meals and we already have procedures in place. And so it's easy to add on there. So some of them are expanding. So of the 15 sites, some of those will have now in-person learning. There's a difference. The Student Learning Centers are places where students can go and access their virtual learning. There's not instruction happening there. The students have their headphones there, they have their computers, and they're sitting at their desk and they're accessing their individual classroom, but not getting instruction in the classroom. What we're doing now is we're adding more opportunities for students to get instruction. Some of those will be at some of the existing 15 Student Learning Center sites, and some of them will be elsewhere. There are about 8 Student Learning Center sites that will not overlap with these sites. And so then there's the other 7 of the Student Learning Center sites that will, going forward, will have the Student Learning Centers there and we'll have some in-person instruction happening. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Allison, it does answer my question, but don't go anywhere because
Okay.
I have another one that's a little bit more direct and to the point. Allison, will parents be given a choice whether to participate in small group in-person learning?
Absolutely. So I think what we really saw with the Student Learning Centers is that we have a range of parents who want their children to be in an in-person setting and some who don't. And we've seen that in the surveys that Chief Hike Hubbard and her team have done. And so we're well aware of that. And so this is a choice of parents. We know that we are hearing from some parents, and we heard it with the Student Learning Centers, that there are some parents who really want some opportunity for their children to be in person. Maybe it's that they feel that their student needs additional support with learning, and so these in-person learning opportunities will really be better for some students, and that's why we focus on students where we think that's particularly the case: students with disabilities, English language learners, early learners. And then in the Student Learning Centers, some of those are families who the people we prioritize, both homeless students as well as students where the parents need to work outside of their home in order to do their job. And so those are places where we needed to support families. When we opened the Student Learning Centers, it was really interesting to see that we saw a lot of early learners enrolled, and we saw a lot of students with disabilities enroll. And so that kind of spoke to us about where we're seeing need from parents, and parents are expressing a wish for support. And we've seen that too with enrolling in these in-person sites. So we're trying to be responsive to what we're hearing from parents, what we're seeing, and what we're seeing in the surveys, and provide them a choice. But yes, if for a family they decide the best option for them and the best option for their student is to remain virtual, then that is still an option.
Thank you, Allison. Yeah, we had quite a few questions related to, yeah, is this a choice?
Yeah.
So I thank you. And now, because you see that ventilator on the screen, I'm going to call Dr. Lynette Washington up to talk about it. Hi,
Great.
Dr. Washington, welcome back. So as you can see, I have a picture, I have a photo of a ventilator. We have a question from our audience. How is air ventilation going to work at our schools related to small group in-person learning?
Okay. So Andre, just one correction. So it's an air purifier.
Oh.
And I just want to make a distinction between the ventilation system and the filtration system. So an air purifier is to filter the air. And so in all of our schools, we will have purifiers, or there are MERV 13s that are going within most of our schools. And so as we're in the process of upgrading all of our schools with the MERV 13 filters in order to also filter the air, we're going to be temporarily installing purifiers in our schools, basically to continue to filter that air until the MERV 13 filter upgrade has happened within those particular buildings. And so what you see is an air purifier that's going to be set up in all of our classrooms if the building has not received a MERV 13 upgrade.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. And you helped me to use the proper language, which is important because people count on me for that information. Thank you, Dr. Washington. I appreciate it. Now, Chief John Davis, could you come join me? There you go. Hi, Chief Davis. How you doing?
All right, Andre, how are you? You look good in the school.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a great place to be. There are two questions I'd like you to answer. The first one you've spoken to in the previous town hall, but I think it's just something folks may need to hear again. The question is, what if a student just absolutely does not want to wear a mask or a face covering, and they're attending small group in-person learning? What are some of the ways that we would consider addressing it?
I will absolutely get to this. I want to be super clear about, first of all, I feel like as adults, we need to actually worry about ourselves first, because we can begin to get comfortable with each other in the different meetings we have and the different spaces we usually occupy. And so what we've heard, frankly, across the nation, and I've heard it from colleagues, is that it is the adults as much as the kids that we have to worry about being comfortable and making sure we have the 6 feet apart. I think, there's always this question about what if a student, right? And so far in our student learning centers, I don't know of one situation where it has gotten to the point where a child will not wear their mask. Now, if it so the normal routine is going to be, yep, the mask drops below the nose, or maybe it's being worn incorrectly, right? We will redirect the child and make sure they're doing the right thing. And we'll continue to do that because it happens to all of us. At the same time, if a child does end up getting belligerent, right, and does not want to wear a mask, then of course we'll begin to get the parents involved, and we'll try to rectify the situation. Was it just a bad day? Did we have to get them out of the classroom? Kind of like you would if a child is having a bad day in a normal setting. And if it ends up getting too far, then yes, we might actually apply the code of conduct if we have to, right? Those are situations that are extreme. And like I said, we haven't seen that at the student learning centers. And so I don't want that to be the main narrative about this. But yes, you will take the normal responses you would with a child who's not following directions. And if it really gets too far, then we have to take even more measures. And so, yes, we will do that if it gets that far. But I don't think that it will, right? Students have been in the virus just like we have. They know that it is serious. principals and school leadership teams will reinforce this as students come back, right? It's not like you just come back and then you get in a class and you start. No, these types of precautions, the importance of wearing a mask, we will reiterate. It'll be about school culture. It'll be about doing the right thing for each other. It'll be about protecting yourself and protecting the people you're with. So we will make sure that the messages are there so that the culture and the climate is the right thing so that students won't want to take off their mask. But there's always people that want to ask, what are we going to do if a child won't do this? Well, we will take the normal precautions and bring in parents, talk to parents, work with children. And if it gets too far, then yes, we might have to use the code of conduct. They might have to go home for a day. I don't think that's going to happen. But if it does get that far, then we will do the right thing. But it's really about creating the right culture and climate within your school so that we are protecting ourselves, protecting others. We're all in this together.
Thank you, Chief Davis. I said you had given that answer before, but every audience is different. So it's always good when we can reinforce great points like that. On to the next one, Chief Davis. How are families being notified if their school will be part of the in-person learning effort?
Even though we put out the list today, schools were already notifying their parents and writ large about what classrooms will come back. And then also making individual phone calls and telling the individual classrooms for the parents and the families that were a part of that classroom. Now, I'm sure that as principals and their leadership teams were doing that for the past week, they probably had some misinformation, like maybe they didn't have the right phone number. And so I'm sure probably not every parent got an individual call, but I know a lot of individual calls happened. And we reiterated that with principals today. We meet with principals. We met with them every day last week, and we're meeting with them 2 or 3 times this week. And so it's really about the principal and the leadership team sending out the right communication to everyone in their school community about who is coming back. And then those classrooms that are coming back, it'll be some type of individual touch to see if principal or to see if the family, each individual family wants to come back. A lot of that communication has already happened, but I'm sure not all of it. So it will continue here for the next couple of days.
Thank you, Chief Davis. And I have one more academic question. I said 2, but it never works out that easily for me. We have a commenter that's asking, if my child elects to stay in a virtual environment, who's going to teach them if you're having in-person learning? So if we have students that remain in the virtual environment, who's going to ultimately teach them?
So it really will be a school by school situation, and I'll give you a couple of instances. There could be a situation where a child may have to change their teacher. We do not want that to happen, but I feel like I have to tell the truth and show that transparency, right? There could be a situation where if a teacher is teaching inside a classroom, they may not be able to teach those same kids virtually. We don't want that to happen. There will be situations where we'll be able to use, say, a camera inside the classroom and hopefully be able to teach both the kids virtually and the kids inside the classroom, but we can't guarantee that in all cases. There will be cases where if there are 2 teachers that are teaching a group of students, maybe one of them will teach virtually and one will teach in person. And in that case, there probably won't be a change. So it's really how a school has set up their schedule, and it will depend on that. But there is a chance that a student's teacher might change. We don't want that to happen, and we're trying to look at all situations within a schedule to keep that consistency because we know that's important. But I do feel like I have to say that out loud, just in case it does happen. It is not the preferable situation. But again, there's other teachers there that, again, maybe one of the kindergarten teachers is teaching in person and then one is teaching virtually. And that's kind of how it's been so far. So we're hoping we don't have to make a change, but it might happen.
Thank you, Chief Davis. 3 for 3. I appreciate you. Thanks a lot. Now I'm going to call forth our CEO, Dr. Santelises.
I'm back, Andre.
Hey, and it's always good to see you're back, Dr. Santolis. Thanks a lot. We have quite a few questions around this topic, and I thought it'd be best for you to answer. Given the increase in infection rates, what's our level of concern in city schools as we move forward with small group in-person learning?
No, it's a great question, and one that I've been thinking about since the summer, because there was a lot of discussion amongst the medical professionals about an increase in cases during the fall and winter months. So I am concerned. I will say the last week and a half to 2 weeks, we have been checking in with our health advisory members, with the health commissioner. And so one of the things that we are monitoring very closely is the numbers of people, including students and teachers, who will be in school buildings. And so that part of the monitoring is as, frankly, as important as how many schools are opening up, is really looking at the numbers of students in space, the number of teachers in a particular school at a given time. The other piece that we're monitoring is where the infection is being transmitted. And one of the things that we are seeing, even throughout Baltimore City, is that the schools that are open, schools are not the primary transition point. That actually it is, in a number of cases, when we have looked at this with the health department in Baltimore City, frankly, a lot of the cases and the transmission and people coming down with COVID is actually happening in time outside of school and outside of work. So it's happening on weekends. It's happening with kind of us all like letting our guard down in family events or friend events. But with regard to actual in-school transmission between adults and students and student to student, that's actually not where we're seeing it, and it's not where we're seeing it across the city. So we're paying very close attention to the in-school transmission rates, paying very close attention to particular zip codes, places in the city, and paying very close attention, particularly this week, as we hear from families, how many students and teachers we're expecting to be in a school at a given time. So in a couple of cases of schools that were listed today, based on some of the pre-work that principals did, we know that we might be talking, 4 or 5 classes of 6 or 7 students each, so 50 students in a building with an additional 5 teachers is not what's considered kind of a crowd where you might be more concerned about transmission, which is some of what we've been seeing all along. But absolutely, not only am I concerned now, I was concerned in August before the data was showing what it's showing now. So we are watching those very closely. We're watching the city's measures, and we're watching our own numbers to make sure that if the time comes, we will not just close our pods like we are used to doing in cases of COVID, but we might need to restrict or cap numbers based on what the shifts are in the city.
Thank you, Doc. And I have one follow-up question. This relates to your contact with your peers, either here in Maryland or throughout the country. Do you all talk often? Do you share ideas? One of our writers is like, what can we learn from other school districts?
No, absolutely. And I will say here and now what I've said before and in other settings, I am incredibly thankful for my colleagues, superintendents, and school districts that have gone ahead, either in other states, other jurisdictions, other districts similar to Baltimore City, as well as some of the early trends we saw overseas. But again, even like here in places like Detroit that have similar demographics to us. So it has been and continues to be incredibly important. It's actually part of why we've made some of the adjustments and decisions we have. So for example, even some of the cleaning routines, the barriers, Dr. Washington, a great example, convened with other school districts around air purification and the purifiers that you saw there. We've learned about the slow return. Some of what has informed the numbers of students and families we're having back has come from other school districts who have said, whatever you do, don't have everybody back all at once at the same time. And they shared some of our learning, and that's informed which products and processes work the best, which ones are, might be easier for staff as opposed to others. So I just really appreciate kind of the fellowship of educators who have gone before, who really have been influential in informing, and many, I might add, in places that have already experienced high infection rates, who have really been in school for a while, who have really been able to share their learning and best practices. So it really is important and a great question.
Thank you, Dr. Santalisa, as always. I appreciate you.
Sure.
Dr. Washington, can you come back and join me?
Hi, Andre.
Hi. As you can see, we're showing off disinfecting and cleaning wet wipes, but that's not why I'm here to talk to you about that big old bucket. I'm here to talk to you about a question that we received that asked, will the schools get sanitized every day once students leave?
Yes, so there's 3 stages. There's the cleaning, there's disinfecting, and then there's also sanitizing. And so schools will get sanitized. There is a process by which for classrooms and bathrooms, it's 3 times a day. We have a full checklist schedule for every single space within our school as how many times that it's going to get cleaned and how frequently it's going to be cleaned. And so off the top of my head, I know that it's bathrooms and classrooms will be 3 times a day. I have to pull up the checklist to see all of the other spaces, but we do have a checklist of every single space in the classrooms, not in the classrooms, in the building. And all custodians will have that particular checklist to know how frequently, 2 times, 3 times, every evening, daily, twice a week. They'll have a checklist of every single space within that building and how frequently that space needs to be cleaned, sanitized, and also disinfected.
Thank you, Dr. Washington, as always. You've been on fire tonight. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Andre.
Thank you. Now, Cleo Hirsch. Cleo, come join me.
Hi, Andre.
Hi, Cleo. It's good to see you. Cleo is a special assistant to the chief of staff and one of my partners in crime and getting anything done. Well, not crime, but in the business of the district. And Cleo's been instrumental in the launch of our student learning centers, along with our friends at Baltimore City Rec and Parks. So Cleo's an expert in some of the little nuances that we're doing to keep kids safe. Cleo, our folks can see this nice blue line down the middle of the hallway. Why is there a blue line in the middle of the hallway?
Sure. So one of the things we've tried to do is be really thoughtful about how students and adults will move throughout the building to promote social distancing. So social distancing doesn't just happen in the classroom at the desks that are 6 feet apart, but also in every way we move throughout the building. So if you look at the hallways of the beautiful beach, as we call it, beach field, you're going to see arrows that show which direction you're allowed to walk based on what side of the blue line you're on. And you'll also see those 6 feet circular decals on the floor. And that's just a reminder to help students as well as the adults to remember to stay 6 feet apart when they're lining up and as they're traveling throughout the hallway.
Thanks, Cleo. I saw the blue lines in some of our video, and I just want to make certain folks that they understand even the little small things that we're doing to try to keep our kids safe and our staff too. Thanks, Cleo. And now I'm going to call Allison Perkins Cohen, the special assistant to the chief of staff herself. Now, Allison, one of the reasons that we're here tonight, that I'm here in the building and that we have a live camera on, is to be transparent. We want to show folks what we're doing so they can get a sense of what it may look and feel like. When we speak about transparency, we've seen a number of comments, both in this space and outside of it, related to the desire for a dashboard. In fact, I think it came up at our board forum last week. As we're looking forward, is that a project that we're working towards or considering?
Yeah. So thanks for asking the question. It's a good question. We have been working on this. We are working. You and I had a conversation about it last week. This is something we hope to have up soon that would give people a way to just track key data metrics about what's going on in our learning sites, our in-person sites in terms of number of COVID cases. We're trying to figure out how to technical ways to make sure that the data easily feeds in and make sure we're on the same page about what we're reporting. But having that kind of transparent information is something we really want to make sure that that families and staff have access to. So we will be putting that together and hope to have that up and running fairly soon, going back to when we started at the Learning Pods on September 28th.
Thank you, Allison, as always. I appreciate you. Chief Davis, can you come join me on camera? He's coming. There he is. Hey, Chief, how you doing?
All right.
One of our visitors tonight is asking, how do I inform my child's school when I want her to go back, when I want her to participate in in-person learning? And when will this start?
So the second question is the easier one. We're starting 2 weeks from today, which is November 16th. The previous question is a little bit more nuanced because A, it has to be one of the schools that we listed today in our announcement, and two, not all the classrooms are coming back, right? For the most part, it's kindergarten classrooms and some of our students with special needs. Sometimes there's other classrooms as well, some of our ESL classrooms and a few others. But any parent who thinks that that their school knows that their school is going to be open should reach out to the principal and let them know this. If they don't know if their classroom is going to be open yet and they need to find that out, just email the principal, right? I want the principals and the schools to be proactive enough so that all the community knows it ahead of time. But like I said previously, I know that probably hasn't happened at every school just yet. And so for individual parents that are wondering, right, make sure that your school is one of the ones that are coming back. And then secondly, right, check with your principal about if it is those classrooms and those grades and if that teacher is coming back. So I would say just email the principal directly and find out those details if you don't know them already.
All right, and one more question, Chief Davis. And again, I don't think this one is easy to answer, but I just want to pose it anyway, just because it was posed to us. At this point, do we have any sense for how many students will be in a classroom? It sounds like it might be a school by school challenge, right?
It's a classroom by classroom challenge. I think one of the, Andre, I think you asked one of the questions about the Beachfield classroom that was shown today, and it looks a little bit bigger than some of the other classrooms. And yes, some classrooms, right, will hold more than others. And, you know, we will work to actually fill that classroom as many students as the classroom can take in a responsible, socially distanced way. So that's the first way that we'll look at this. I think there are going to be some classrooms where the demand is more than the amount inside a classroom. And so a school might have to go to a situation where they split the class in two. Maybe they will have another teacher that can teach that, or maybe they will have to go into what we call a hybrid situation, where half the kids will come in on Monday and Tuesday, and the other half will come in on Thursday and Friday. And so I don't think that will happen much, but it is really a classroom by classroom, not just school by school. It is a classroom by classroom determination to make sure that students are properly socially distanced, 6 feet apart. And based on that, then it'll be that number of students that we can hold inside a classroom. And then we'll see if we can fill that up based on the parents and their want of their child to come back or not.
Thank you, Chief Davis. I appreciate you. Before I pass this to a different question, there's something I want to read real quick. Hey, Chief Perkins Cohen, can you come say that on camera, please? I think this would be great regarding classroom sizes.
Sure, this is actually Dr. Washington's expertise, but Dr. Washington's team has done work really looking at how we would safely set up classrooms. And so in our health and safety guidance in standard operating procedures, it kind of walks through how a teacher should approach setting up classrooms of different sizes and gives guidelines for a number of students that we should be able to serve in classrooms of different sizes. So that's a real tool that should be helpful to schools as they start setting up their classrooms going forward.
Thank you, appreciate you. All right, before we're in the stretch run, you all, we have about 7 minutes left. But there is one thing I want to mention because Allison just referenced our health and safety standard operating procedures. I want you to visit our website, www.baltimorecityschools.org. Why do I want you to go there? Because today we updated our webpage on health and safety procedures. And we added a pretty helpful FAQ at the bottom. We have about, I would estimate 13 questions thus far, based on things that we've heard from you, or based on things that we know we need to address internally to make sure that we're keeping both our staff and our students safe. So I would love you to go to our website, baltimorecityschools.org, and visit our health and safety webpage where you can check out that FAQ. You can check out our standard operating procedures and a wealth of other information related to the topic at hand, which is keeping everybody safe as we're opening up our schools and giving families the option, and I emphasize the option, to return, to let their students come back and learn in an in-person environment. Dr. Washington, the theme of this evening has been cleaning. And as we answer questions, we get more cleaning related questions. So Dr. Washington, this one seems like it's a pretty straight up one, but I'll ask it anyway. Who's going to be doing all this cleaning? That's a verbatim question. Yeah, I actually do know the answer. Doc, who's going to be doing all the cleaning?
So custodians are going to be doing the cleaning. We've looked at the additional requirements. We look at square footage of the facility space, and we have a calculation to say how many custodians you need per square foot, given all of the additional COVID requirements. So in some spaces, we have to have additional custodians in order to support the cleaning that happens during the day and also the cleaning that happens in the evening for the spaces.
All right, and thank you, Dr. Washington. And to a second point, what about our stock of cleaning supplies and PPE? Although, as you can see here on the screen, we're showing off what we have available for our schools. Mm-hmm. It's worth saying one more time, do we have enough cleaning supplies to support our buildings?
Yes, so I mean, I feel confident that we have enough. We also have a process in place for schools. So if they need to have additional cleaning supplies and to replenish, we have a way by which it's called our School Dude program, where we put in work orders. They also can put in additional requests to replenish their cleaning supplies too. So all of our schools are stocked with soap and paper towels and all of those different things. We start stocking our schools back up sometime back in March. But again, there is a process by which a principal or school administrator can reach out to say, I need additional supplies, I need to replenish what I have. And we have a process by which we can do that and also get it distributed to those particular schools. So I am confident that we have enough cleaning supplies because we have a lot of it, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. I appreciate you as always. And thanks for allowing us to show off some of those cleaning supplies that you have. Chief Perkins Cohen, can you come back to the front and join me? I see a little discontent among our audience. Some of our teachers are saying, you haven't answered any teacher-related questions. So I'm going to try to answer a few today, or before we leave. One of the questions is, it relates to the financial discussion that we had about a month ago, where we said in relation to some of the money that we're spending and the financial stress that we're spending, we had to make changes to our operations in some ways. And one of those involved not using temporary employees at the school sites anymore. Does that mean we won't have teachers able to teach in-person learning?
Yeah, good question. So no, we really, so it does not mean that we will not have teachers. It did not, the temporary employees was not, was a decision we made kind of, wasn't what our preference would be. But what we've really been trying to do since this started is really looking at what we're spending and really prioritizing so that we can meet the needs that we're hearing from parents and from students and from our union partners about what we need to have in schools. And, some of the cleaning supplies that you're seeing a lot of the questions about tonight, the custodial staffing, those are some of the things that we have heard for good reason time and again, that people want to make sure that we have those resources in place. And of course, the computers that we bought and so on. So we've really tried to look at all of our spending and very carefully prioritize reducing costs where we can and really putting investments in place to make sure we're meeting students' needs. So in-person learning is something that is really important for some of our students. We know that, we've heard that from parents, that there are some students we know we're not serving well enough in the virtual environment, and we need to be able to serve them in person. And so we've really reorganized our budget to make sure we can meet their needs. But we do have funding for teachers, and we will have the staffing necessary in those places to really provide a robust, high quality experience for our students.
All right, don't go anywhere, Allison. I have one more question. And Jocelyn, I saw your question. Jocelyn's a good friend of mine. She's in the audience. So I wanted to let her know I answered the question. Oh, I didn't, you did. Chief Perkins Cohen, were teachers, did they volunteer for this or did we just mandate it as far as their participation?
So there's a bit of a combination. So you talked, Dr. Santelisa's talked in the beginning about the number of sites that we have is a little bit more than we originally predicted. So some of these sites are sites where we are really identified priority students that we know we need to serve, and that we've really seen that we need to serve from some of our in-person experiences at the student learning centers or from what we've heard from families. So some of our students with disabilities at our separate public day schools, some of our early learners like our pre-K and K students who are also students with disabilities, that those are areas where it's really hard to do this work remotely for those little people. And so we've really prioritized those students. And then in our other sites, we did compel some teachers to come back. We're looking at kindergarten teachers where we, again, in the schools that we're doing in person, this is another area where it's very hard for young learners to learn to read or do math remotely. And so we prioritize those teachers, and we also prioritize special ed teachers. So some of these teachers are teachers that we are compelling to come back. And then some of them are ones that have volunteered. And so as we indicated at the beginning, we have more sites than we originally intended, both because of principals who really wanted to do in person and because of teachers who volunteered to do in person. And so we are going to be able to serve more students with in-person experiences than we originally planned, which is great.
Thank you, Chief Perkins Cohen. You're a rock star as usual. I appreciate you. Chief Davis, I'd like you to take the last question of the evening. Hi, Andre. I'm not just see myself. All right, Chief Davis, you've got the grand finale here. The final question is from Kian Abdul Malik. Kian asks, are the schools on the list from today only for students who registered for those schools, or are they open to any student throughout the district who falls in those specialty groups?
No, they're for students who fall in just who have enrolled into that particular school, right? We're doing everything we can to keep students in those same relationships and in those same school environments. And so right now, if you are a kindergarten student, but your school isn't bringing back anyone, then no, it's not open to you. It's open to the kindergarten students in that classroom that's coming back. So it's very, very specific.
Thank you, Chief Davis, as always. I appreciate your time and you being here tonight. Dr. Santelises, can you come up to the front so we can close the show?
Sure thing, Andre.
All right, Dr. Santelises, we heard a lot tonight. We heard questions about who's coming back and why they're coming back. Lots of cleaning questions. Lots of questions about how we're going to notify people if we do contract COVID cases, or if things become, if the infection rate rises. In particular, is there anything that jumped out for you tonight? Anything that really hit you?
No, I mean, a lot did, and I think you really surfaced the themes. One of the pieces that struck me is the real emphasis in the coming days and weeks on making sure that we are communicating more directly and rapidly about cases to the public. So the dashboard question, how will we know questions. I think those are important looking forward. Also the how do we know what the decision making will look like with regards to increased cases in the city, and being able to update the city schools community very quickly and thoroughly based on our kind of ongoing caucusing with the city and looking at that. So that whole piece about how we're communicating, how we're getting the word out, really struck me for future work and future town halls. So folks should stay tuned. We know that actually the state is looking at how do we report on COVID cases in schools across the state. So we really are trying to align our reporting with that. The other thing that struck me was just reiterating that this really is a choice for families. We were incredibly thrilled to see as many sites that are able to open with small groups as we are. But again, really making sure that the protocols are in place. Shout out to the beach field, the big beach with Principal Caridio and her team, who I've had the chance to visit. And actually, Principal Caridio had to pull me out of one classroom because she told me I was breaking protocol. So even I got pulled up, and we'll continue to do that. But really appreciate the questions. Questions help make us better and really are informing kind of the next wave of information that we need to have ready for schools and families and staff. And just a big shout out to everyone who is planning to receive small groups of children in the coming weeks. So shout out for all the great work that the team has done across the organization and the questions again that help us get better. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Andre.
Well, thank you, Dr. Santelises. I got it from my chair.
Okay.
You can't talk and have feedback. It's terrible. So I have to turn my mic down. Thank you, Dr. Santelises, for being here. Thank you to the entire cabinet leadership team for joining us today. Thank you to Beachfield. Thank you for having us. Yeah. This is my first time here, you all. I love when I go to our schools. I haven't been able to get around as much. So coming to see our buildings, it'll always warm your heart. So if you choose to have your student come back, we love to have them. In the meantime, visit our website, www.baltimorecityschools.org. We've got a number of great resources about in-person learning, health and safety, and anything else you need to be successful, even virtual learning. So with that, I am Andre Riley, your Director of Communications for Baltimore City Public Schools. It's been a pleasure having you with us tonight. We'll see you before long. In the meantime, you stay safe and have a great evening.